The last few years have been challenging for many of us, and I for one will admit this. But through education, mentoring, support and planning, I'm excited about the future of my business, even in this dry period. As Stu spoke about before, I was surprised when I was asked to speak, but not many of us can comprehend or relate to Ebor's so-called drought with 800 mils of rainfall. I've been asked to share my story, the roller coaster of the highs and lows, the mistakes and the wins, what I have learned and where I plan on going. I want to admit I don't know everything. I have made plenty of mistakes and I have a lot to learn. At the beginning, I didn't feel I had control of my business, my financials, how much feed I had in my paddocks, and how many cattle I could handle. I was unbelievably hungry for information, but I wanted to know it all yesterday. This consistently made me left me feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, stressed, incapable, and the list goes on. I think we should all remember we all have different visions, goals, farms, and bank accounts. What has worked for me might not necessarily suit your business, but it's through education and planning that myself, my business, and my farm are in a much better place mentally, financially, and ecologically. I don't know how to... There we go. Oh. I'll put it down. Before I get into it, I'd like to share a bit about myself and a few important people. I grew up in Sydney and believe not being a generational farmer is an advantage. I'm lucky I don't have preconceived ideas about how to run the farm. The start of my regenerative journey was reading Rachel Treasure's books growing up. It has always made me question what we do and why. My dad, top right, dad lives in Sydney and is meant to be retired but keeps himself extremely busy. I probably don't tell him enough, but every day I'm thankful for not only helping me invest in a farm, but also for believing in me. We've written our goals and visions together, and he is 100% on board with the regenerative practices we follow. Hugh, my fiancé, bottom left. Hugh's the cattle manager on his family's conventional farming and cattle property at Breezer. We've been on this journey together into regenerative agriculture, and he's been endless support and encouragement. Jimmy, bottom right. Jimmy is one of my neighbours who started adjusting cattle on the farm early on. He soon became the muscles on the farm when needed and has spent many hours teaching me practical skills. I would hate to count the hours he's spent in the buggy with me while I blabber on about grass. But nevertheless, he's always supported me and always been there to run the farm when I'm off at schools or away. The farm. We bought 2,300 acres on the edge of Liverpool Plains at Blackville, about an hour and a half southwest of Tamworth. It ranges from creek flats to steep hill country, but predominantly all heavy black soils. This photo was taken once we settled. Spring 16 had been exceptional. The property had already been divided up into 60 paddocks, some into cells, but with a huge range in paddock sizes from about 1.5 hectares to 200 hectares. As I mentioned, Jimmy adjusted 40 cows and calves on the farm, but I was ready to go in guns blazing and buy some of my own. I had no idea how much feed I had or how many cattle to buy, so I just started buying. I had the grand idea of direct selling grass-fed beef to consumers under my own brand. To do that, I needed a cow herd to have consistency of good homegrown beef to sell. At the dearest point of the market, in November 16, we purchased 100 overpriced but very well-bred cows and calves. To add to that, I also purchased 180 trade steers in December and January. I had been attending numerous one-day events around the area on regenerative agriculture and was soaking in as much information as possible. I was learning about soil health, stock density, and plant rest and recovery, so I boxed all my cattle together and started moving them around the paddocks. Not having the knowledge and ability to match my stocking rate to my carrying capacity ran me unstuck. Overstocking, overgrazing, and poor mob psychology were some of the results I faced. To put it simply, I just had too many cattle for the grass I had available. Once I thought a paddock was heavily grazed enough, I would move the mob onto the next paddock. Eventually, the mob had made their way around the entire property. During this time, due to minimal rainfall, the plants had not had time to recover. Even though the plants were not recovered, I had to put the cattle somewhere. This is where overgrazing occurred. Regrazing re-grazing plants that had not had the chance to fully recover. I had started the vortex, the downhill spiral. Every time I moved the mob around the property, their moves would get faster and faster due to the lack of feed in the paddocks. In the cells especially, even today, I can see the degradation I created from grazing by grazing unrecovered plants. I have noticed this by increased bare ground and less desirable plant species. Another result of poor management was mob psychology. I had not run such a large mob in little paddocks before. Each time my cattle saw my red buggy, they would head for the gate waiting for the next move. The cattle were not only unsettled, but I now also believe hungry. The result of this was poor average daily gains, sickness, and plenty of pink eye. It is very simple. If I had started destocking in this period, I would have been able to slow down my moves due to less mouths or less LSUs. This is why using a grazing chart, feed budgeting, and forward planning is extremely important, and I'll touch on this later.